Hello and welcome to Discover Parrots. Today I'm going to talk about 5 parrot books with their author. Rosemary Low is well known as a parrot breeder both at home, on a small scale, and as a curator of parrots at Loro Parque and later at Palmitos Park in the Canary Islands. She is well known for her work on conservation, on protection of all sorts of parrots around the world, where she put her effort, time and money into different charities or contributed her own. She has received the prestigious Gorilla Award from the Loro Parque Foundation recently, and a few days ago I was at her home talking to her about 2 books which I've read recently, these 2 books, 2 other books which she has just published and they are just becoming available on the market, and 1 other book which is coming out soon. So here's my interview with Rosemary Low. Hello Rosemary, thank you for inviting me at your home, at your beautiful home, and thanks for being here for Discover Parrots.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here, Florian, and thank you so much for your appreciation of my work and of my books.
Oh, I love your books, and many people love your books. I can see you have lots of them. You authored about 30 books or so, and you also contribute to Parrots magazine and many other publications.
That's right.
You write about breeding, about keeping parrots at home as companions and how to deal with different problems that that poses to keepers. You write a lot about survival of species in the wild and how we can mend the wrongs we did to the parrots in the past. Each of your book has a theme and then treats it very deeply, and I would like today to mention a few of your books which I've read recently. You didn't publish them today, but the first one would be Go West for Parrots. So this is the book, and you wrote it a few years ago. It's Go West for Parrots, a South American Odyssey, is a tale of your travels, your extensive travels to South America and a bit of Central America, so in the neotropics, let's say, in search of the wonderful world of parrots.
That's right. Well, for me, South America is the most fascinating continent for its wide diversity of species, especially of parrots. 150 of the approximately 400 parrot species are found in South America, and there's so many different habitats. Some of the parrots are quite widespread. Others, for example, like the El Oro parakeet, which is found in the Andes of Ecuador, have very small ranges, and they're also highly threatened by deforestation. So some are fairly easy to see in the wild, whereas others it's a tremendous challenge to find them.
Yeah, I was surprised to see that unlike people who would go just to tick a few species, you went in search of specific parrots located in sometimes remote and inaccessible areas.
Yes, that's right.
And the foothills of volcanoes, at very high elevations, in deserts, swept by fierce winds, in deep jungles, and of course you treat also of the common species. There's not no doubt.
I love to observe all birds. It doesn't matter how common they are. I just like watching their behaviour.
Yes.
That is the most interesting part. Also seeing what they feed on, especially with parrots, because so many people who keep parrots know almost nothing about their lives in the wild, which was one of the reasons I wrote that book. I want people to know how they live, the hazards that they encounter all the time, what they feed on, and so many people who keep parrots need to know this and don't know it. So that's one reason why I wrote Go West for Parrots.
Yes, this is a central idea of all your work, that in order to understand the parrot in your living room, you have to know about it, of its cousins
Absolutely.
in the wild.
Yes, and people should understand that more and make an effort, even if they can't go to remote places. These days there is so much information available that they can easily find out a lot about the species they keep and adapt their management, especially their diet. One of the problems with parrot keeping is when people have a lot of different parrot species and they try to standardise the diets.
Yes.
It just doesn't work. And also, of course, parrots are so highly individual that what works for one individual does not work for another. So there's a lot of work to feed parrots correctly, and it should be based on what they eat in the wild. We can't replicate that, but strangely enough, there are quite a lot of plants or trees that grow in our gardens, wild or introduced, that are food sources of the parrots we keep. So with a little bit of research, we can uncover those facts.
Would you encourage people to go and travel, have a holiday in one of those tropical places in, I don't know, Brazil or Costa Rica?
Absolutely, yes. A good starting place is Costa Rica, because it's relatively easy to see the birds, very good infrastructure, good roads. It's an easy place to travel about, and there are good guides there, and there's so many wonderful birds and of course other animals in Costa Rica. So yes, there's a couple of chapters on Costa Rica in that book, and it's a very rewarding place, the ideal start for the neotropics.
But it wasn't so easy when you started in the 70s. We went there and I was surprised to see it was difficult from home back to there.
Oh my goodness. I mean, there were hardly direct flights to anywhere.
Yes.
You know, to get to a country in South America, you might have to take 4 or 5 different flights. And also, the other factor that people today don't know about is that you had a limited amount of currency that you could take out of the country.
Yes.
And every currency transaction had to be recorded in your passport. So you had to be very careful how you spent your money.
Which was a problem when you were in need of money, of cash at some point.
Yeah, I think you're referring to when my husband and I were in Jamaica, and a taxi driver, I mean, you don't mess with taxi drivers in Jamaica.
Not in Jamaica.
He demanded quite a lot of money and almost cleared us out of cash.
Yes, there are many such difficulties which you mentioned in your book, and it's very good to read. It has a narrative. It takes you from place to place, from the 70s to the 2000s.
Yes,
it's a very nice. It's a true Odyssey in the world of parrots. My favorite memory from this book is this thing: how you started out as a tourist in South America, where you were the only one interested in birds, let alone parrots.
Yeah.
And now, in these years, in our time, you were the only one in a group of ornithologists, all searching for birds, the only one who wouldn't twitch, who wouldn't just look for numbers of species to tick on a list.
As I said before, it's behaviour that fascinates me. I'm not interested in how many species I see. I just want to know what they're doing and what they're eating and where they're nesting.
Yes, it's all very transparent in your book, and I recommend it to anyone who wishes to get a deeper knowledge of their parrot friends, to read the book and maybe get inspired. Get on a trip, see some.
Well, I hope it
parrots.
does inspire people. When I wrote that book, I wanted to inspire people to go and see how their birds live in the wild.
Yes.
And also to realise how many threats there are against them. That it's difficult to be a parrot.
It's more. I mean, it's easier to see those things when you're there, boots on the ground, talking to local people, see the situation, see the extent of damage we've done, also the extent of the reparation that charities supported by you and other people, and we support as well, you know, what Parrot Trust and others have done. So then you can actually get courage and hope for supporting parrots and enjoy them.
But above all, it's a different sensation. Let me just read you a paragraph about how I felt the first time I was in a rainforest.
Please.
In Colombia, in the Amazon, right, where Peru and Brazil, the three countries meet. And I wrote about that. My first ever experience of the rainforest was paradise. To be in an environment not dominated by man is in itself a potentially life-changing experience for anyone from the concrete jungle of the so-called civilized world. After a couple of days, England was forgotten, as remote as the moon. And, you know, after that, I just wanted to keep going back to as many different countries to see as many different parrots as possible.
Wonderful, yes. You're not the only one who travels today in search of parrots and birds in general, but as far as I know, you're the only one who writes books about this, so I'm very grateful and I encourage people to take part in this and change their minds. And speaking of changing minds, may I introduce another book which I recently read to our parrot lovers. It's A Century of Parrots, and this book is a historic look at our relationship with parrots in the 20th century. Starting a bit earlier, of course, because you introduce people who were born before that and the traditions and the practices before that, and then into the 20th century, different aspects of how parrots were captured and traded and kept, and how people changed their attitudes towards parrots in good and bad ways during the 20th century. I like in particular the first period, the Romantic period, when people were still discovering species, and you have a chapter on this. And then not necessarily discovering species to science, but discovering species of parrot for aviculture, when travelers, explorers were going in faraway places and bringing parrots to London and other places.
Before importation became out of control.
Yes, just small numbers of parrots.
Small numbers. But by private collectors, the birds were well looked after.
Yes,
and they went to experienced aviculturists. There were a number of very wealthy aviculturists then.
Of course,
But one of the reasons I wrote that book was because most people have no idea of the extent of trade and the horrors suffered by countless millions of parrots through importation.
Yes.
You know, younger people, or today even middle-aged people, are shocked when they learn about it, and they need to know that. Yes. And they need to know why trade of wild-caught birds should not continue.
Yes. It's a difficult read in a way, because you deal here with the tragic stories of some species that were completely wiped out in existence, a few species which went extinct, others which went extinct into the wild and are only present in captivity, and others that almost went extinct, almost.
Yes,
the last time.
I mean, in our lifetime, only probably one species of parrot has become extinct, and that's another Pirhura species in the Andes. But even that, it was only known very recently, the Parrot parakeet, that it is probably extinct.
Yes.
Because there was so little exploration of some areas such as the high Andes, and the status of so many parrots, that is how endangered or threatened they are. In many cases, it's relatively relevant information. You know, when I started to be interested or to travel, the status of most parrots in the wild was completely unknown.
Yes.
And so much has happened, especially in the past, say, 20 years. Of course, that's not covered in that book, but I felt it was very important to document a history in the 20th century, to bring it together, because nowhere can you find all these stories and all this information.
Yes.
And I felt it needed to be told.
It's a wonderful monograph. It's rich in pictures, even in color pictures of parrots, but also historic pictures of people who were involved with the discovery of parrots, and you know, traders in the old times. It's rich in information and accurate information. You go deep to the level of subspecies, because sometimes you mention that some species as such are not threatened, but some of the subspecies on some islands or some valleys are extinct or going to extinction, and people don't notice because the species as such is not threatened. Or even you go to this kind of detail and they say widely spread species like the blue-fronted Amazon, for example, because they are not a concern to the IUCN, they are a bit neglected, at least at the edges.
Absolutely, that is a very good example. Trade in the blue-fronted or turquoise-fronted, as scientists call it now,
yes,
is appalling. I mean, in some areas of Brazil, like 10,000 chicks might be taken in 1 year. And that, we don't know how many there are, but the scale of theft of chicks from the nest is so extensive that this is a threatened species. But of course it's considered as a common species by most people. But there is one wonderful lady, Glaucia Seixas, who is concentrating on that and trying to educate people about that. But there's such a long tradition of taking this species in Brazil that it's very challenging work to get this message across.
Yes.
But as you say, it's perceived as a common species, but so was the Carolina parakeet once.
It was abundant, it was widespread. Well, a quarter of the American territory was covered by this species, and now it's gone.
Yeah.
So we have to do something. Conservation is very important. May I introduce another book, which is one of the two books we just published. This is Parrot Conservation. So for anyone interested seriously about parrot conservation, this is a wonderful book. It's a thick and heavy book, full of information. It's a bit more technical or academic, with chapters for each species or group of interest, with references at the end of the chapter, with an introduction on what is conservation, what issues of conservation we're interested in, and also practical measures
that have been taken to conserve,
such as the ones you mentioned before, direct conservation, but also education, which in your work proved to be central.
Education as a local people is so important. You know, years ago, take the example of the Puerto Rican Amazon, there would be scientists from the United States going there to do the work. But that doesn't really work unless you're involving the local people to look after the species. It's not successful. Fortunately, that's increasingly realised, and now there are some wonderful people working on the ground with the different endangered species. That's what you have to motivate the local people to conserve them, not people coming from overseas. This is
hot from the press. I just received it about an hour before leaving my home on your way. I've got the chance to read only a few bits of the book in the car, not while driving, my wife was driving. So, for example, the story of the blue and gold macaw on
reintroduction to Trinidad.
Yes, so that's an example where one person who was born there went back and with the local community involved,
and she motivated the local people. She initiated the project to reintroduce the species after it had been trapped to extinction on Trinidad. And she is a wonderful, wonderful lady who inspires all the local people.
But you were there. You went with her on the ground and visited the place, and you were present. I like that, despite the fact that this can be taken as a technical book, like a reference book on conservation, almost like a manual of conservation for this most endangered group of all birds. The most endangered order of birds is the Psittaciforme, which is the parrot.
As a group, yeah.
It also has your personal experience in all of these chapters, your presence here and there and elsewhere.
Well, I felt I needed to do that to bring it to life. Otherwise, it can be quite an uninteresting statement of what has happened. But if you describe what you've seen with your own eyes and the people you've met who are involved in conservation, then I think it puts a different perspective on it, which makes it more interesting.
It's perfect because it's technical, but it's not dry. It's personal and it's alive, and it's you and it's the other people with photos and names and the good deeds they did. So I'm anxious to go home and read the whole of it, because your style is very good as well. I have to say to our viewers, Rosemary Low's book read very well. It's a very pleasant lecture. So so may I mention another freshly published book? So this is the most recent one.
A week ago you would not have been holding that in your hand.
So thank you for giving me this copy, which is not yet in shops. Parrots, a celebration of their beauty. A very beautiful book, wonderfully illustrated, and I'll let you maybe say a few words about your aim with this book, what the idea is, what the main idea of this book is.
Well, the idea was that there have been dozens of books published on parrots, but how amazing that no one has published a book on the beauty of parrots and on their plumage. That was the original idea, to emphasize the wide variety of colours and plumage types, but then it sort of morphed into something a little bit more technical about how they got these colours, although we don't always know exactly how they evolved. But and then aspects such as how different areas of coloration breaks up their outline to disguise them. So many people think it's amazing that such brightly coloured birds can be so difficult to observe. Well, you know that. In fact, I have a couple of your photos taken in Africa to show just how well camouflaged parrots are in a tree.
Yes, despite the colours that in the living room look bright and different from the background here.
Yes, but they just disappear, and you often you don't even know they're there until the fruits or leaves are dropping onto the ground, and then suddenly a whole flock explodes from the tree, and you think, wow, there were so many there and I didn't know.
Yes, it's amazing. There's a lot to say about coloration in parrots.
Yes.
How they ensure their survival by camouflage, but also communication between the members of the pair or the couple. And I'm looking forward to reading this because I know a few things. I'm a biologist. I'm interested in this, but I've always enjoyed this. Reading your books, because there's always a surprise in it for me, even for the people who read books about parrots. Your new book brings something even newer.
I did have a new idea with that. I thought, well, how do you judge which is the most beautiful parrot? No two people can possibly have the same idea. So what I did, I polled 44 people. They were all involved with parrots as scientists, researchers, artists, even aviculturists, but my one condition was they had to know parrots in the wild. Yes. Because to me, if you only know a parrot species in captivity, you don't really know that parrot. Yeah. So it was fascinating. I asked them to give me their top 10 most beautiful. from 44 people. So then I scored them in order, and then I had a chapter on, I've forgotten how many, about 30 of them. That people consider.
What an idea!
Yeah.
Why did I have this idea? It's always good to see how you bring something new.
And then I asked a lot of people for just little quotes about why they thought different species were beautiful, or why they chose that particular species. And as with you, a lot of it had to do with childhood memories.
Yes, I remember you sending me that email.
And you weren't the only person who said that. So some of the results were a little bit surprising, because it wasn't only beauty, there are other aspects come into it as well.
Fantastic. So you're not interested only in parrots, but also in people who like parrots.
Yes.
It's another dimension of this book. Do you have anything even new? What's next after these wonderful books?
Well, you're just a little bit early to see the next one. It's just extraordinary that after working for 4 years on, well, it's 4 or nearly 5 books now, all 4 were published in the same month. So my next one, which will be hot off the printer's press in about 2 weeks, is called Female Heroes of Bird Conservation, because there are now, and in the past, so many wonderful women who have done extraordinary things for bird conservation, and some of them, their names are completely forgotten today, and they need to be remembered, along with women now who are doing wonderful work in the field with little recognition. So this book, it really absorbed me. The research I was doing revealed absolutely extraordinary, awesome women.
I'm so excited to hear this, because you know, I work at the Natural History Museum in London.
Yeah.
We cherish the work of female scientists like Evelyn Cheeseman, which
yes.
I hear she's in your book.
Yes, she is.
And others. I'm not going to give too many spoilers, but it's a very good, very current movement of recognizing the work of female scientists, because they've kind of been forgotten.
Yeah, and there are some really inspirational women. You know, for example, especially in Brazil, and there's Nieva Guedes, who almost single-handedly saved the Pantanal population of the hyacinth macaw from extinction. I mean, when she started work on it more than 30 years ago, she could see the coming fate of that bird, because it had been so heavily trapped. And she tried to interest some of the really big conservation organisations for funding, and none of them were interested. She started with nothing.
Yes.
Nothing. Just
Wow.
working on her own in the field. And she built up this wonderful organisation. And they, of course, one of the problems with the hugest parrot, the hyacinth macaw, is that it needs big nest sites. And because of the deforestation, well, not so much deforestation, the cutting down the suitable trees, because it's not a forest species, it's in the Pantanal.
Yes.
But because suitable nesting sites had been cut down, she started this program of putting up nest boxes, hundreds of them, and that is not easy when you've got a heavy box for a big bird. I mean, I've seen them trying to haul these nest boxes into the tops of trees, yes. And believe me, they're very dedicated people who are doing that, and then climbing up using proper climbing gear, yeah. To inspect the boxes, and it's just, and they're nearly all women working on that project.
I find it very good that you are putting forward this idea, this fact actually, that women are involved in conservation research and education in this case about nature, of course, but in other fields. But and you are part of this. I'm not sure if you are in the book,
no,
you're the author,
no.
but you're one of those wonderful women who contributed for decades to conservation and to raising awareness for parrots and more generally in nature.
But what is so marvellous about these women is that they weren't just involved, they initiated these things on their own,
yes,
which makes them extraordinary.
And more women today are traveling around the world, they're taking pictures. You know, we have common friends who are good photographers, and they publish articles in papers.
Such good work.
You have recently met younger researchers from all over the world who conduct research on parrots.
And you know, some of them have explained to me the problems of being a woman working in the field.
Yes.
And the problems of being a woman when you've got a young family, for example. They're working under conditions which are far more difficult than those that men experience. And
different cultures, different societies.
Different cultures, exactly.
Like
as I say,
or traditions. Which
yes, I mean, in some countries, the women's families forbade them even to go in the field on their own, but they disobeyed because it was their passion.
Yeah.
And just, I think you don't have to be a bird lover to enjoy this book, Female Heroes of Bird Conservation. The stories are so inspirational that I think it will have a wide appeal.
I can't wait to get it and read it. I'm very happy to hear that this year Laura Parker Foundation gave the famous, the prestigious Gorilla Award, which you got in 2017. Again, they gave it to a woman who's involved in education or research.
Tourism,
promoting tourism, which is part of the solution to protecting parrots. Better going with tourists who pay to see the parrots alive than trapping them, sending them to homes in Europe or all over the world. So well done to you and to the other women, and thank you for writing these books and giving us this kind of knowledge.
Well, for me, writing is usually a great pleasure. I don't know how to stop. But still, nonetheless, it's hard work, and I can see it. The quality of your books is amazing. So thank you for that, and thank you for inviting me today here in your home, where everything is about parrots. You have lots of nice pictures and sculptures of parrots. Of course, you have the parrots, which I hope to see today in your aviaries. And thank you for being here for Discover Parrots. Thank you very much, Rosemary Low. Oh, thank you, Florian, for your YouTube channel, which does a lot to educate people about parrots.
Thank you, my pleasure. So that's it. Thank you for watching my talk with Rosemary Low. She kindly gave me 3 of these books to give away. So check this space for my future videos in which I review each book in part and talk more about its content and its style. And then when I go to Go West for Parrots, I will let you know how you can get a copy. Thank you very much. See you in my next video. Bye bye.